Love is getting a lot of hate right now. This after federal authorities have raided two properties linked to him, one on each coast. Sean Combs appears to be part of an investigation into a sex trafficking operation. And of course, this comes as he faces multiple lawsuits that accuse him of assault and abuse, and he denies it all. We're bringing you the latest details to drop in connection with Diddy and the massive investigation. I mean, what's interesting about this is we actually were focusing on it, 3-4 weeks ago. I did a very big sidebar on it where I broke down all of the latest lawsuits facing the rapper, the mogul, the reported billionaire. And at the time, we were really highlighting one of the big lawsuits that he was facing. A producer named Little Rod Jones had sued him for sexual harassment, sexual assault, was alleging absolutely horrendous things against him. And this is on the heels of other lawsuits. Remember, Cassie Ventura had filed a lawsuit against him. She settled the day after, but she accused him of rape and human trafficking. I mean, the worst stuff you can imagine. And then all of a sudden you fast forward, and this week you see Diddy's name throughout the whole news. Why? Because federal agents raided properties that were connected to the rapper this past Monday. And it was reported that this is all in connection to an ongoing sex trafficking investigation. Now, to be clear, it has not been 100% confirmed by authorities if Combs is a target or subject of the investigation. Certain outlets are reporting that Combs is the target. What do I mean by that? Target is essentially the person that prosecutors have evidence against. They're the one they're building a criminal case against. So if he's the target of the investigation, that is a very big deal. It is being reported that the search was pursuant to a search warrant issued through the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. The probable cause that a crime has been committed, gathering evidence in connection of that, and clearly a federal judge signed off on this in order for these properties to be raided. And who are they raided by? Homeland Security carried out the raid. Homeland Security focuses on human trafficking investigations, among other things. Now, NBC News reported that several people have been interviewed by federal authorities in connection to allegations of sex trafficking, sexual assault, solicitation, distribution of illegal narcotics and firearms. This is so eerily reminiscent and consistent with the allegations from all of these high-profile lawsuits that I mentioned that were filed against Combs, his family, his businesses, his associates, sex trafficking, sexual harassment, sexual assault. It was a wild scene, though, at these properties. You saw agents swarming onto the properties, sometimes with guns drawn. We saw video of several individuals, including who appear to be Combs' sons, Justin and King, in handcuffs. Now, it seems like they were detained, not arrested. And at the time of this recording, it is not clear where Sean Combs is. There's been mixed reporting about his jet, his location. We don't really know. But what we do know is that at the time of this recording, neither he nor anyone else has been arrested or charged or indicted in connection with this operation. There are some updates, though, and those updates are what we want to talk about. So first up, there was this idea, as I mentioned, this probable cause, the search warrant signed by a judge. It's a very big deal. And we still don't know what exactly they're looking for. When you talk about sex trafficking, human trafficking, you're talking about bringing people across state lines for sexual activities or commercial profit. Commercial sex acts is another way to say it. And so what they might be looking at, you might be looking at documents, you might be looking at computers, electronic devices. One of the things that stands out to me when I think about one of these prior lawsuits, Little Rod Jones, this producer, he alleged that Sean Combs has cameras in all of his homes, and these cameras captured a lot of this illicit behavior as a form of blackmail. So was it possible they were looking at the camera systems? We just don't know. But one of the big updates that I have to talk about is this statement from Combs' attorney, Aaron Dyer. This statement reads, and it was from yesterday, it says, quote, "Yesterday, there was a gross overuse of military-level force as search warrants were executed at Mr. Combs' residences. There is no excuse for the excessive show of force and hostility exhibited by authorities or the way his children and employees were treated. Mr. Combs was never detained but spoke to and cooperated with authorities. Despite media speculation, neither Mr. Combs nor any of his family members have been arrested, nor has their ability to travel been restricted in any way. This unprecedented ambush, paired with an advanced, coordinated media presence, leads to a premature rush to judgment of Mr. Combs and is nothing more than a witch hunt based on meritless accusations made in civil lawsuits. There's been no finding of criminal or civil liability with any of these allegations. Mr. Combs is innocent and will continue to fight every single day to clear his name. A lot of things to break down from this one. Number one, yes, he hasn't currently been charged with anything. The civil cases, one settled, the other ones are still ongoing, so he has not been found liable. That is all true. That could change. Is it premature to call this a witch hunt? Possibly. One of the things that I've noted is that you could say it's unique that indictments, arrests have not come in conjunction with a massive raid like this. Sometimes, usually they do, but other times they don't. You need to build a case. And you hear this idea about perhaps that federal authorities have spoken with a number of individuals that might have given them probable cause to then go for the search warrant to find more information. We've interviewed Tracy Walder, former FBI CIA agent, who said that you go onto these properties, this raid, one of the things you needed to do was to actually retain evidence, make sure it's not destroyed. Perhaps the authorities were tipped off that evidence was about to be destroyed. Not clear. But the idea of this military level force I thought was so interesting because we have to remember, again, going back to the lawsuits, again, these are lawsuits, these are allegations, different standard. We're not talking about a criminal case, but when we talk about that and we look at the allegations in these lawsuits, there has been allegations of firearms possession, that Diddy forced his associates to carry weapons for him. There was a shooting that was referenced, two shootings, let me rephrase, two shootings were referenced in that Little Rod Jones lawsuit where Diddy engaged in this and allegedly engaged in this and then had people cover up for him. So with those thoughts in mind, and you're looking at how big these properties are, it is not surprising that you see this level of force. Authorities don't know what they're going into, and they have to detain people, bring them outside, not only for their safety, but for the safety of the people they detained as well as they're going into these properties. So the level of military force, you could argue, was justified. They mentioned that these electronics were seized. We don't know what the contents of them are. We don't know exactly what they're looking for, but that digital footprint, as we've covered in a number of cases, can be quite substantial. And ABC has reported that agents seized a number of electronic devices. Now, there's another update we want to talk about. I mentioned how there's been no arrests or indictments. Yes, in connection with the sex trafficking investigation. However, there was an arrest of a man named Brendan Paul, someone who is alleged to be Combs' drug mule, alleged that he supplied him with these illicit substances. This is, I believe, an allegation in the Little Rod Jones lawsuit. Well, he was arrested for cocaine and marijuana possession out in Florida, I believe at the airport. He has been bailed out. Just a little interesting detail about that. Now, his attorney, Brian Bieber, issued a statement to CNN. The statement says, quote, "We do not plan on trying this case in the media. All issues will be dealt with in court." Interesting. Also want to talk about the arrests here. So again, there's been no arrests, but there could have been false speculation. There could have been rumors that Diddy's sons, Justin and King, were arrested. They were handcuffed outside of the LA property during the raid. No indication they were arrested. TMZ actually reported that they came back to the home to move things out. When we first saw the images of this, I was reminded that his son, one of his sons, was implicated in wrongdoing in a lot of these illicit acts by Little Rod Jones in that lawsuit. That one of his sons was involved in a shooting at a music studio, that his son was present during a party where minor underage women were present. So when I first saw the images of them in handcuffs, you could make the mental leap that they were possibly arrested, but that is not the case. They were just detained. Now I also want to highlight something that was a little disturbing. So when this happened, this raid happened, apparently some guy shows up outside of the raid in LA, claims to be Diddy's neighbor, tells reporters that he was noticing some shady things going down with Diddy, said he saw some wild things at night. It was reported on, it was amplified, it was circulated around. Turns out that may not even be true, that he may not even be a neighbor. I have to highlight this when we're talking about a high-profile person like Diddy, okay? Rumors, speculation, misinformation is going to happen. And we have to be careful of that. We have to be mindful of that. And in a legal point of view, when you talk about Diddy and his cases, one of the things he has said in the past about all of these lawsuits is that it's a chain reaction. One person comes out, another person comes out, another person comes out. It's a money grab. They're making things up. That could very well be true, but it could also be that they're telling the truth. So we have to always keep a mindful eye about people's motivations and why they're going to be coming out during this time. Let's always remember that. And talking about that, let's talk about the celebrity reaction. So there are some celebrities who have made comments about this raid, including Cassie Ventura, whose lawsuit really blew up in the whole thing for the public. She accused Combs, as I said, for years of abuse, assault, rape, trafficking. The events she described in her lawsuit were horrific. And one day after she filed it, Combs settled. Those details were confidential. But Douglas Wigdor, who represents Ms. Ventura, as well as a Jane Doe that filed claims against Combs, said in a statement, quote, "We will always support law enforcement when it seeks to prosecute those that have violated the law. Hopefully this is the beginning of a process that will hold Mr. Combs responsible for his depraved conduct. Even when you settle a case, those individuals could still cooperate with law enforcement." And I got the impression that after the Ventura settlement, it was never absolving Combs of wrongdoing. So let's be clear of that. There are others who have had beef with Sean Combs in the past. He has a long-standing public feud with fellow rapper 50 Cent, who after the raid posted on Instagram, "Now it's not Diddy Do It, it's Diddy Done." It seems to be in reference to a documentary series that he's trying to put forward, the Diddy Do It. But he goes, "It's Diddy Done. They don't come like that unless they got a case." Since then, he's posted several memes mocking Diddy's legal troubles. He also said Diddy was, quote, "too freaky for society." And then we have Aubrey O'Day. She also commented on the raids. Now, Combs helped launch her music career in the early 2000s on his reality show Making the Band 3. She joined a group that became known as Danity Kane. But in later seasons of the show, O'Day was dismissed from the group, with Combs saying, quote, "She wasn't the same person he signed. That fame had changed her." But in a podcast in 2022, O'Day revealed that she was fired because, quote, "she wasn't willing to do what was expected of her, not talent-wise, but in other areas." Well, after the raids on Combs' home, O'Day posted, quote, "What you sow, you shall reap. I pray this emboldens all of us victims to finally speak on what we have endured." Well, with that in mind, I am joined by Nadia Shihata. She is one of the New York prosecutors on the R. Kelly case, one of the people who helped put him away. She is now a criminal defense attorney. Nadia, so good to have you on here, Sidebar. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
What is your reaction to the Diddy case, the Diddy raids?
Well, I think it's a significant development in the case. Obviously, he's presumed innocent. No charges have been filed against him. But when you take a step like executing search warrants so publicly at two different locations, it means you have amassed significant evidence. You've got probable cause to believe a crime has been committed, which is the same standard for arrest. So it's significant. Now, obviously, as a federal prosecutor, you want to make sure you have proof beyond a reasonable doubt when you charge a case. So they're continuing to investigate, but it's certainly a significant step.
I am starting to believe, at first I was saying maybe it's surprising that they didn't have arrests in conjunction with the raid or an indictment in conjunction with the raid. And then I started thinking, well, they obviously had probable cause. Perhaps they were speaking with people, but they needed more evidence on those properties. Perhaps before there was an allegation, maybe before it was destroyed, they want to preserve it. They want to get that evidence. They might be issuing subpoenas to people. I think that now I'm wondering if we may not see potential criminal charges for a while, because it also might have to be submitted to a grand jury too, right? So we shouldn't expect perhaps charges against Diddy maybe for a little bit.
Absolutely. Look, if they're following kind of the playbook we used in R. Kelly and pursuing similar charges as we did in that case, these types of cases, take a little bit of time to investigate and to make sure you're corroborating all the victim testimony you're getting. You want phone records, you want travel records. There's all sorts of corroboration that you're sending out subpoenas for, that you're speaking to people about, and then also conducting searches to help with that.
What did you think of the criticism from Diddy's lawyer that this was an excessive military-style use of force? What's your take on that?
Look, it did appear that there were some kind of military vehicles used. As prosecutors, you're not kind of calling the shots on how agents operationally conduct a search. My guess is, giving them the benefit of the doubt, that there were allegations that there were firearms in the property. It's a very large property, and Diddy likely had security with firearms, so they have to secure the location and they have to ensure the safety of everyone conducting the search. So, sometimes they err on the side of using as much firepower as possible in those circumstances.
Yeah, especially given the allegations of the lawsuits, which makes me wonder, do you think the lawsuits are what precipitated this? Do you think the people who are accusing Diddy of wrongdoing are the ones who might be cooperating witnesses and what set this ball rolling?
I think it's very possible that the public filing of that first lawsuit came to the attention of federal agents and prosecutors and may have sparked this. And then obviously the follow-on lawsuits, once that first lawsuit was public, have only added to the allegations. And as a prosecutor, you might start with the people who have made allegations publicly in a lawsuit, but I don't think they're going to stop there by any means. That's just the beginning, and then you're investigating, you're talking to more people. Other victims may be coming forward who have not been public at all now that they're seeing that this is a serious investigation. So it's a starting point.
We don't know what they found in the house, and I'm going to ask you about what you think they might be looking for. But for example, if there was an allegation, hey, Diddy has guns all over the place, and then you go to the properties and there are firearms all over the place, that kind of corroborates what they're being told, and that could be useful for prosecutors in trying to establish a case, establishing that what they're being told is real. But what do you think they're looking for specifically if they are moving forward in a sex trafficking investigation?
They're looking for anything that is corroborating information that has been given to them by live witnesses and victims. So, it's been reported they were looking for electronic devices. Sure, they're going to be looking for videos potentially of sexual activity engaged in with complaining victims, but they're also going to be looking for communications, particularly if they are pursuing potential RICO charges. I think they're going to be looking particularly for communications between Diddy and his inner circle, his inner network of people that may have helped or facilitated or enabled him to commit potential criminal activity.
Now, the reason I was so excited to talk to you about this is because you were part of a very infamous prosecution of a very infamous individual. Do you see similarities between the Combs case? Let me rephrase, Combs hasn't been charged, but do you see similarities if we're talking about potential sex trafficking charges? You know what the allegations are right now against Mr. Combs. Do you see similarities between him and R. Kelly?
Look, every case is different, obviously, but there do appear to be some similarities based on the public allegations that have been made. For example, the allegations about forcing individuals to have sex with others for the pleasure of Diddy in this circumstance. There were similar allegations with R. Kelly, and that he recorded that activity. So it's a pretty striking similarity in that sense.
But also the level of influence and power, right? A big part of it when I'm reading the lawsuits is just, you surround yourself with this team, you have tremendous wealth, access, this lifestyle. It was eerily reminiscent of what we were hearing from Kelly, right?
Absolutely. When you reach a certain level of fame and you've got a group of people around you that are literally there to help you with whatever whim you have, legal or illegal, and are getting paid to do so, and are, more than happy to turn a blind eye to whatever else may be going on. That's a very big similarity. Again, these are just allegations at this point against Mr. Combs, but yes.
And he hasn't been criminally charged. So when his lawyer says there's been no criminal liability, no civil liability, he's exactly right. Those lawsuits are still pending. The lawsuit with Cassie Ventura was settled. At the time of this recording, Sean Combs has not been criminally charged in any way. Want to make that clear. But I always thought it was interesting when you think about how the Kelly criminal prosecution began, how it started. It wasn't would you say it was from the documentary that was released that kind of got the ball rolling? Because again, you wonder, what is the thing that gets going? With Harvey Weinstein, it was that New York Times article. With R. Kelly, it was a really damaging documentary. Maybe that was what you could say started the ball rolling. Here with Combs, maybe it was these lawsuits. I find it so interesting, the similarities with what begins a criminal investigation.
Yeah, look, in R. Kelly, there's no doubt that the documentary and the public airing of allegations certainly came to the attention of law enforcement, and we began looking into it. But again, in all of these cases, that's just the starting point. To bring a federal criminal prosecution, you really have to amass credible evidence that you can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. But the public airing of such information against well-known people, that does get investigations started. There's no doubt about that.
What was it like prosecuting R. Kelly?
You know, we tried to, as best we could, approach it as we would any other important case that we prosecuted. Obviously, there was a lot of media attention to it, and R. Kelly fans, I would say the biggest thing that could have potentially affected the case was a lot of our victims received a lot of harassment on social media and so forth, and that takes a toll on people and certainly makes them hesitant to want to move forward with a case.
When you were first prosecuting him, did you see a lot of people coming to R. Kelly's defense? Because at this time, I don't know if I'm seeing that so much with Diddy. Actually, what we're seeing is a lot of videos coming out from years ago that are looked at in a different context. You see high-profile celebrities who are making these comments, these innuendos about him. I don't see a ton of defense for Diddy. When you were first going after Kelly, I mean, was there a ton of? Were you yourself receiving any backlash, any threats? Was there a lot of support for him?
It wasn't support from kind of public, well-known figures, but he had a lot of kind of just regular fan support that would post on social media, YouTube channels, send emails, mostly to victims, not to the prosecutors. But we did receive, some of our own kind of threats and such.
That's so disappointing to hear. So if this is a case where Diddy is ultimately arrested, ultimately charged, federal prosecutors, what advice would you give them prosecuting a well-known figure like Diddy?
I would tell them put their heads down and pursue it as they would any other case. Try to block out all the noise and just build your case step by step, put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And, if it's reportedly the Southern District of New York, those are very good prosecutors, and that's what I would expect them to do.
And how do you prove it? What do you have to show in a sex trafficking related case? What do you have to prove to make that conviction?
Yeah, so it depends exactly how they're pursuing this. If they do it through a RICO, which I suspect they're probably looking into, they're going to need to show an enterprise, so an inner circle, a group that helps him facilitate a pattern of criminal activity. And then that pattern can include things like forced labor or sex trafficking. The sex trafficking here could be, transporting people via his private plane or otherwise to commit commercial sex. And commercial sex doesn't necessarily have to mean, paying money, but also receiving anything of value. So he's making videos of this activity. That could be a thing of value as well. So, and using force or fraud or coercion to do that. And so abusing victims, putting them in humiliating situations,
right.
That can all be part of that.
Or promising them money or something of value and then not delivering it. That would classify it as well?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. So, and what would be the challenges that prosecutors would face? Legal challenges. How would someone in Diddy's position, or if someone was arrested, someone else in connection with this, how do they defend it? What kind of arguments would you expect from the defense that you would have to fight back on?
Yeah, if they pursue RICO charges, I imagine a defense would be that there was no criminal enterprise, that this, to the extent there was criminal activity, this was one person acting alone. And if it's not RICO, a lot of it would potentially fall outside of the statute of limitations. So the advantage of RICO is it lets you go kind of decades potentially in the past, and also it expands venue, so you can charge criminal activity that occurred not just in the Southern District of New York, but throughout the country. If that's taken away, that would be a big hit to the scope of any criminal indictment.
Last year, Diddy's ex-girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura, who you probably know as singer Cassie, accused him of sex trafficking and sexual slavery. She alleged that Diddy raped her and beat her so severely that she was bruised. Cassie also alleged Diddy made her have sex with prostitutes and recorded it on video. She also says he forced her to carry a gun. Cassie sued him under New York's Adult Survivors Act and settled with Diddy outside of court just one day after the suit was filed. Joy Dickerson Neal also filed suit against Diddy under the Adult Survivors Act, accusing him of drugging and sexually assaulting her back in 1991 when she was a college student at Syracuse University. Diddy was slammed with yet another lawsuit last month, this time brought on by music producer Rodney Jones, also known as Lil Rod. The 73-page lawsuit lays out dozens of allegations against Diddy, including that he forced Lil Rod to hire prostitutes and have sex with them. The court doc also claims Diddy himself assaulted Lil Rod, but that's not the only bombshell allegations revealed in the detailed documents. Lil Rod doesn't shy away from publicly naming other celebrities he says assaulted him.
I don't know that Cuba Gooding Jr. is going to escape from that one.
Let's start with the allegations against Academy Award-winning actor Cuba Gooding Jr. Lil Rod alleges Diddy was, quote, grooming him to pass him off to his friends. This fear became reality when Mr. Combs introduced Mr. Jones to Cuba Gooding Jr. when they were on Mr. Combs' yacht. There's actually photos of their interaction together too, which are laid out in those court documents. In the first pic, you see Diddy and Cuba talking with Diddy's arms on Cuba's. In the next pic, Cuba has his arm around Lil Rod and is smirking. Court docs go on to state, quote, Cuba Gooding Jr. began touching, groping, and fondling Mr. Jones's legs, his inner thighs near his groin, the small of his back near his buttocks, and his shoulders. He rejected his advances, and Mr. Gooding Jr. did not stop until Mr. Jones forcibly pushed him away.
In the last couple of years, there were allegations against him for sexual assault. So now we have those prior allegations, and now we see him tied to this case as allegedly trying to, assault a little lad, assault others.
Back in 2019, Cuba was booked on misdemeanor charges of forcible touching and sexual abuse after he allegedly groped a woman in Times Square. By the next year, 3 women had come forward accusing him of non-consensual sexual touching. He eventually reached a deal with prosecutors that required 6 months of counseling but no jail time.
I'm getting the feeling where there's smoke, there's fire, right? Because now we have 2 different instances where you're accused of the same type of behavior, years apart. I think there's something there. And I don't know that Cuba Gooding Jr. is going to escape from that one, because he already saw definitely people moving away from him within Hollywood circles and other circles once those first sexual assault allegations came out. So at this point, I don't think he's going to get away with it a second time.
Is it possible that he could face charges based on these allegations that were brought forward by Lil Rod?
It is possible as well. Again, we've got the statute of limitations issue to deal with. So depending on the time frame of when this happened is, again, the Adult Survivors Act, which was the vehicle where many of these lawsuits came out, many of these civil lawsuits, came out, there was a finite amount of time for those suits to be filed. The time frame is going to be very, very important. What witnesses come forward, because again, this may not be a situation where DNA may be at play. This may be more of a situation of, hey, yes, I was there and I recall, Cuba Gooding Jr., putting his hands on Lil Rod, or I recall certain aspects. So it's going to be a very witness intensive type of case. And the question is, will the witnesses be willing to come forward?
Lil Rod's lawsuit also publicly named another celebrity linked to Diddy, Jennifer Lopez.
From the standpoint of the names of the celebrities that were tied to this, the fact that Jennifer Lopez was tied to this back when she was involved in a party to a shooting at a nightclub when she was dating Diddy, and is now alleged to have brought the gun with her to the scene and gave it to Diddy, and that's how the shooting occurred.
Lil Rod's team brings up J-Lo when establishing Diddy's history, writing his, quote, RICO enterprise has existed for at least 20 years, dating back to the 1999 nightclub shooting in NYC, when Mr. Combs required his then-girlfriend Jennifer Lopez to transport his illegal firearm into the NYC nightclub. The court docs allege Diddy forced his then-artist Shine to assume responsibility for the shooting of several individuals. All this happened back on December 27, 1999, when a fight broke out at a nightclub. Diddy, J-Lo, and rapper Shine were all there, and according to former rapper Mark Curry, Diddy paid Shine $1 million to take the fall for the shooting and serve a 10-year prison sentence. Lil Rod's lawsuit now suggests it was J-Lo who brought the gun. The fact that she's named as somebody who was carrying a weapon, could that be incriminating for Jennifer Lopez?
It can be, but with a huge caveat, right? If I'm not mistaken, that shooting did not result in a death. I know that somebody was harmed, but I don't believe anyone was killed. Because of that, you have the statute of limitations to deal with, which is basically a prolonged amount of a certain amount of time that a prosecutor has to be able to bring charges against someone. And it varies from state to state. But the one thing is consistent is that there is no statute of limitations on murder. So if P. Diddy had actually killed this person, or the person died as a result of their injuries, now J-Lo could be brought into the mix as a co-defendant because of the fact that the person has passed away. But if the person is alive, and maybe they had serious injuries, whatever the case may be, statute of limitations would run. And it is highly likely at this juncture that statute of limitations have expired, therefore she does not have any criminal liability. But the reputational damage might be a different story, because now she's branding herself as something very different than who she was back then. Back then she was very much, I'm Jenny from the block. She was, dating a variety of hip hop artists. She was very much in that world. Now she's married to Ben Affleck. She's trying to, portray herself in a different manner. So now her past is going to come back to haunt her, and we don't know what that's going to mean for her future in terms of movie deals, music deals, or anything like that. So I think for her, it might be more reputational damage than criminal liability.
Pearson says it's possible Jennifer Lopez could file some sort of defamation suit, but it's not likely.
She could, but at the end of the day, when it comes to defamation and those types of cases, truth is an absolute defense. So if he has some sort of receipts to basically prove that, hey, I was right there, I saw her the same way in the filings, you saw a number of different screenshots and pictures that he submitted to support the different points that he was making. If he has some pictures to substantiate that she was carrying the gun, it is going to be very hard for her to say in good conscience in a court of law that, this wasn't true, he's made this up, and now as a result, I've lost, money, I've lost opportunities and things like that. There's going to be too much evidence out there connecting her to this that is going to be very hard for a jury to come back and say, yeah, he's making all of this up.
But it's not just artists that Lil Rod named either. He specifically mentioned Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, in his court documents. It reads in part, quote, Mr. Combs was known for throwing the best parties. Affiliation with and/or sponsorship of Mr. Combs' sex trafficking parties garnered legitimacy and access to political figures, artists, musicians, and international dignitaries like British Royal Prince Harry. Why even name Prince Harry? There's no allegations against him or anything, but why bring him up?
I think it may have been a move to bring more credibility to the filing and say that, basically he being Diddy, was using his fame, fortune, and influence to insulate himself. So he was able to legitimize some of the activities he was doing by having these lavish parties bringing all these A-list celebrities, but somewhere in a back room or somewhere in another wing, horrible things were happening. So the fact that Prince Harry was there does not necessarily mean he was participating in what was happening. And just because you were at a party doesn't mean you know what's happening in every inch of the house. I mean, if you think about it, if the party's being thrown in a mansion, there are various floors and wings. So it is completely possible that he was there and did not participate. Now, you had said Prince Andrew, especially as a result of the allegations that came out in connection with the Epstein case, that they were close and that they traveled together, and there was a person that alleged that he had sexually assaulted her while she was underage. That would be a different story. But Prince Harry and the way that it was mentioned seemed to be very, again, just sort of trying to bring legitimacy and talk about these were the people that Diddy surrounded himself by to protect himself.
So Prince Harry has no formal accusations against him, but the name association could cause damage to his reputation. Even so, Pearson says it's not likely he files any sort of defamation suit.
It's possible that Prince Harry may be able to preserve his reputation. But again, just in light of everything him and the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, have been through, I truly really hope that, he's able to completely distance himself, maybe make a statement, because again, since he's not necessarily under the umbrella of the royal family directly, so in other words, Buckingham Palace would not be releasing a statement on his behalf. It would be him releasing a statement and saying, yes, I went to X party, but no, I never engaged in any inappropriate behavior or other details that he may see fit to share. So that's going to be, we're going to have to wait and see on that one. But again, since it was such a minuscule mention in the greater context of this filing, he may be okay.
Pearson compares Prince Harry's association with that of President Bill Clinton, who'd been seen with Jeffrey Epstein before his arrest.
And there didn't seem to be much said around him actually engaging in activities, more that he was present at the parties. So I don't recall seeing a lot of fallout on the part of President Clinton from that association.
Speaking of Epstein, Lil Rod's court docs draw a parallel between Diddy's alleged crimes and Jeffrey Epstein's. Epstein died by suicide back in 2019 when he faced numerous charges of sexual assault over the course of multiple years. His longtime companion, Ghislaine Maxwell, was charged and found guilty of sex trafficking in relation to her time with Epstein. She's currently serving out a lengthy prison sentence. Lil Rod compares Diddy's chief of staff, Christina Cahorum, to Ghislaine Maxwell, saying she ordered sex workers and prostitutes for Mr. Combs and ordered and distributed ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, ketamine, marijuana, and mushrooms to Mr. Combs and his celebrity guests who were present on his rented yacht and in his homes in LA, NYC, and Miami.
Under these cases, when you have these high-profile people that have been using people over years, these cases happen without a handler. R. Kelly had a handler, Epstein had a handler, Weinstein had a handler. Everybody has, in those scenarios of those powerful people, powerful men that are abusing other people, they have someone that does their dirty work. And it's usually not only just one person, it's several people who may have different duties. So again, seeing this woman being his handler, being the person to get him drugs, being the person to procure sex workers for him, being the person to basically be on cleanup duty in case of, covering up or silencing people that might want to come forward, that's not unusual. And she is also going to bear the brunt of criminal liability, just like Ghislaine Maxwell did, and basically had to take the entire brunt of the criminal justice system alone because of the fact that, Epstein committed suicide and was not able to be held accountable.
According to Pearson, Diddy and many of his associates will likely face federal charges, but it's not totally clear when. Brand new video just released shows the arrest of P. Diddy's alleged drug mule, who was taken into custody while trying to board the rapper's private jet.
Put him in the car.
We don't hear a word from Brendan Paul, the alleged drug mule, but he doesn't look too happy when he's put in the backseat of a squad car.
Wow, this is really big. This is really big because you're thinking about this huge mogul. Like, everyone knows who Puffy is, who Diddy is, who Puff Daddy is, who Sean Combs is. No matter what his name, you know who he is.
Here's everything we know so far about that alleged drug mule, Brendan Paul, and the P. Diddy case so far.
The question that I will have, and I'm curious to see what will happen, is that whether they're going to use those charges against Brendan to try to flip him, to try to get him to cooperate against any type of prosecution against Puffy or other.
In this specific lawsuit, Lil Rod lists more than 10 plaintiffs, but includes additional names, like that of Brendan Paul, who's listed as Diddy's mule, who allegedly, quote, acquires and distributes Mr. Combs' drugs and guns. On Monday, Paul was reportedly arrested at the airport in Miami while trying to board Diddy's private jet. Florida officers were working with Homeland Security and Customs when they found drugs in his bag. These drugs were tested and the results led to his arrest. He was booked for cocaine and controlled substance possession.
So far, Brendan has only been arrested for possession of a controlled substance, and this is for the narcotics that they recovered, I believe, in one of his bags that was on the airplane where he was stopped in the airport, Miami airport, on Monday. So they haven't linked that to Puffy at all. As of now, it's just for the simple possession, which is still a felony. The question that I will have, and I'm curious to see what will happen, is that whether they're going to use those charges against Brendan to try to flip him, to try to get him to cooperate against any type of prosecution against Puffy or others.
All of this means Brendan Paul is facing felonies in Florida and could even face more charges in the future.
I mean, a felony, you can still do jail time, so it's still a serious matter. It's still a serious charge because you can do jail time having to deal with felony possession of narcotics. But just because he just got charged with those 2 counts, it doesn't mean that in the future he's not going to be charged with several other counts. It all depends where this investigation leads. But again, if I were Puffy, if I were anyone that were associated with Brendan Paul, I would be nervous because it's possible that he can cooperate in order to avoid any jail time and actually sing on other people.
You talked about him flipping or working with prosecutors, investigators, and giving more details. What would all of that look like behind the scenes?
Well, it's something that we're not supposed to know about, but given that I used to be a prosecutor for 16 years, when it comes to cooperating, well, number one, he has to be willing to cooperate. And that's going to be a conversation between the prosecutors and his attorneys will talk to Brendan to see whether that's an avenue they want to take. I mean, personally, depending on how much exposure he has in terms of jail or how much exposure he has about pending other charges that can come about this entire investigation, it may be a question where he's like, it's not worth it for him to cooperate because he'll be scared of any backlash. He'll be scared of being blacklisted in the industry, and he'll just be scared in general that he'll be known as a person that cooperated against Puffy. But this is a conversation that he needs to have with his attorney, and also for the prosecutors to determine whether they're even willing to offer any type of cooperation deal to Mr. Paul.
Here's what we know about Brendan Paul so far. He's 25 years old and from Ohio. He played guard for Syracuse University's basketball team for 2 years before transferring to Fairmont State University. According to a post on his Facebook, he started making beats on his laptop during the pandemic, which kickstarted his work in the music industry. Eventually, he found Diddy and worked on Diddy's Love album, Off the Grid, that was released last fall. Since his arrest a few days ago, Paul has been released on $2,500 bail. The rest of what we know about Paul comes from Lil Rod's February lawsuit that described him as a direct report of Diddy's chief of staff. That's Christina Quorum, who's also listed as a plaintiff in the lawsuit. As this so-called direct report, Paul would allegedly, quote, be responsible for ensuring payment for sex workers in cash. He also allegedly, quote, directly committed and perpetrated violations of Chapter 77 by aiding, abetting, and inducing the sex trafficking venture and sex trafficking of Plaintiff Jones. So Plaintiff Jones is Lil Rod, who alleges Diddy sexually assaulted him and forced him to have sex with prostitutes. Lil Rod's lawsuit goes on to state that Diddy's associates, including Brendan Paul, would allegedly recruit, entice, coerce, harbor, transport, obtain, and provide Mr. Jones, as well as others, into commercial sex acts through means of force, threats of force, fraud, abusive process, and coercion.
I'm sure that those people that are named in that lawsuit are very nervous right now, very nervous, even more nervous now after the execution of that search warrant, but also nervous because he revealed about these secret recordings, and they're wondering whether they could have been secretly recorded. Are there recordings of them engaging in these type of activities? Because even though it may not be criminal, some of those activities, it still does tarnish their image, so they can still take a toll in terms of their branding. But in terms of the lawsuit itself, it's very damaging. You got to think that several companies have already distanced themselves from Puffy, and there haven't been any criminal charges. All you see is a civil lawsuit. So I think there's still going to be more things that are going to come about as a result of that civil lawsuit. But I think the most damaging, again, is Cassie's lawsuit, but more importantly, I think is Little Rod's lawsuit that was filed.
And in the civil lawsuit, Lil Rod specifically, that Brendan Paul is listed almost 20 times. It's alleged that he's a drug mule, so he's getting different kinds of drugs for P. Diddy. He's also procuring prostitutes or sex workers. So if this is eventually investigated and prosecutors determine that there's enough to charge him, what sort of charges would he face?
Well, what you can see from the civil lawsuit, that is possible that Little Rod would be serving as a witness in any criminal prosecution having to deal with Brendan Paul and him being a drug mule. And where you're talking about him being a drug mule, he is facing significant jail time. First off, anything over a day or 2 days or even a month for someone who's never been arrested is significant jail time. But I see Little Rod being one of the main witnesses if Brendan Paul were to be arrested for drug trafficking, because he's saying that he has direct knowledge and photographs that he can authenticate of Brendan Paul being in possession of narcotics in these parties or these gatherings that Puffy was having.
To be very clear, Brendan Paul doesn't face those criminal charges, only the controlled substance charges out of Florida. So we have his specific charges that he's facing for possession of these controlled substances. Are the investigators in that case then working with the federal investigators about this ongoing investigation into P. Diddy?
Well, more than likely that the federal investigators, of course, are going to get the documents and anything related to this arrest, because they want to see if they're able to connect this to their bigger investigation. Again, we keep on saying that the investigation is into Puffy. We don't have direct knowledge that it is. Of course, that will make an emphasis because his homes were searched, but we believe that what they're wanting to do is do further investigation with law enforcement, the Florida case, to see if there's a way that they can tie his arrest to Puffy. But as of now, there has been no link between his arrest on Monday and to Puffy.
Other people listed in the lawsuits or who are close with Diddy haven't been arrested or charged either, but it's possible they could face future charges. We've talked a lot about Diddy's associates because there are several people who are listed in multiple of these lawsuits. He's known to have friends who are with him a lot, almost like an entourage. If I'm one of those people right now and I know that there has been a search warrant executed, that Brendan Paul has been arrested, what sort of steps should I be taking, or what is running through my mind?
Girl, what they need to do is get an attorney immediately, and not just any attorney, but a criminal defense attorney with trial experience to know how to manage an investigation, how to manage what the next steps would be, how to manage to try to be proactive in trying to avoid charges being brought against their client, or to try to minimize their exposure. But I think they should be preparing that there may be called in at least for questioning or to be interviewed by law enforcement. So they should be preparing for that.
Is it possible that we could also hear from other associates who knew Diddy very well and have seen some of these interactions?
Absolutely. You got to think with law enforcement, the U.S. Attorney's Office, even with the District Attorney's Office, that they can issue subpoenas, and issuing subpoenas to these people will require them to appear either before a grand jury or before a court to appear to be interviewed. That doesn't mean that they will appear. It doesn't mean that when they do appear, they'll be giving information, but at least that they will be required to appear. So what would be interesting is whether, if there's a grand jury presentation, is whether any of these individuals will be required to appear before the grand jury to give any type of testimony. But again, the most important part of what they should do is to get a defense attorney to be able to guide them through this process, because you don't want to give conflicted information to a U.S. Attorney's Office or to law enforcement and later on be prosecuted for giving that misinformation.
But without any current charges, Diddy is free to do what he pleases, and that includes leaving the country.
When Diddy's Los Angeles and Miami homes were raided by Homeland Security this week, the singer's attorney released a statement saying, quote, "We will always support law enforcement when it seeks to prosecute those that have violated the law. Hopefully, this is the beginning of a process that will hold Mr. Combs responsible for his depraved conduct." It wasn't the only instance a former girlfriend of Diddy's came forward alleging instances of abuse. Diddy's ex-girlfriend Gina Hunt said in a 2019 interview with controversial blogger Tasha K that Diddy allegedly stomped on her stomach and punched her in the head during one incident. Hun reportedly dated Diddy when he and Cassie were on and off. In the interview, she said she pleaded with Diddy to stop hitting her and said she couldn't breathe after he stomped on her stomach. Just like Cassie, she alleges Diddy was mentally, emotionally, and physically abusive during their time together, and claimed Diddy would compare she and Cassie, saying Hun is the bad one and Cassie is the good one. Hun did not take legal action against Diddy. However, her interview resurfaced around the web when Cassie filed her lawsuit against Diddy. And after this week's raid, previous celebrity interviews are also resurfacing and revealing more about Diddy's alleged conduct. In 2016, singer Usher, who had previously lived with Diddy when he was a teenager, told radio personality Howard Stern very curious things took place at Diddy's so-called Puffy Flavor camp. Usher, who was around 13 at the time, had moved to New York City and lived with Diddy, who was going by Puff Daddy, for a year. The idea to live with Diddy came from L.A. Reid, who was Usher's manager. Usher said he went to live with Diddy for a chance to see the lifestyle and referred to the time period as a wild and crazy time in the 90s. And in a 2004 interview with Rolling Stone, Usher was quoted as saying, "Puff introduced me to a totally different set of stuff. Sex specifically. Sex is so hot in the industry. There was always girls around. You'd open a door and see somebody doing it or several people in a room having an orgy. You never know what's going to happen." But in 2016, when Stern asked whether Puffy's place was filled with chicks and orgying nonstop, Usher responded, "Not really. It was curious and he got a chance to see things but didn't know if he could indulge and understand what he was even looking at." Usher said very curious things took place there that he didn't necessarily understand. As for if it would be a place Usher would consider sending his children to, this is what he had to say.
14 years old. You're a dad now. Would you ever send your kid to Puffy camp?
Hell no.
Meanwhile, a member of a girl group previously founded and managed by Diddy also spoke out after Diddy's homes were raided by federal agents. On Monday, Aubrey O'Day, who is a part of the group Danity Kane, shared a statement about Combs after the raid saying, quote, "What you sow, you shall reap." In December 2022, O'Day said she was fired from Danity Kane in 2008 because she wasn't willing to do what was expected of her, not talent-wise, but in other areas. She said she wasn't the only girl that was in those types of positions. This past September, Diddy announced his plans to reassign publishing rights to select Bad Boy Records artists, including O'Day's group Danity Kane. But O'Day claimed Diddy's deal came with strings attached, those strings being non-disclosure agreements, also known as NDAs, that the artist had to sign. O'Day said the NDA agreement included the artist would not disparage Puff, Bad Boy, Janice Combs, Diddy's mother, Justin Combs Music, EMI Publishing, or Sony ever in public. And despite Diddy presenting the music group Danity Kane with their publishing rights, O'Day said that doesn't equal more money for the group, saying the deal would only bring her less than $1,000 in royalties. Another former artist of Diddy also reacted to this week's raid of Diddy's homes. Rapper Mase called the raid Big Payback and said it was amazing it happened on the anniversary of Life After Death, which was the last album posthumously released by Diddy's best friend, Notorious B.I.G. Mase and Diddy have a long and embattled history. Mase was previously signed to Bad Boy Records in the 90s and the early 2000s. He gave his publishing rights to Diddy for $20,000. When he attempted to get his catalog back years later, he publicly slammed Diddy when the mogul turned down Mase's offer to buy back his publishing for $2 million. Diddy ultimately gave the publishing rights back to Mase. Mase, who had previously worked with Diddy on hits such as Can't Nobody Hold Me Down and Mo Money Mo Problems, before going on to have a successful solo career, said he escaped Diddy. During his podcast, which he hosts with fellow rapper Cameron, he seemingly referred to the serious allegations against Diddy, saying, "Everything now that we see playing out was all the things I escaped." Meanwhile, rapper 50 Cent taunted Diddy on Instagram after the feds raided his homes. The two have been feuding since the early 2000s. 50 Cent, whose real name is Curtis Jackson, wrote, quote, "Now it's not Diddy do it, it's Diddy done. They don't come like that unless they got a case." The beef between the two seemingly dates back to 2006 when 50 released a diss track called The Bomb, where he claimed Diddy knew who shot and killed Biggie in '97. Since then, the two have made numerous comments on each other. When Cassie sued Diddy in November, 50 Cent said his production company was working on a documentary about the sexual assault allegations against Combs, even posting a clip to social media featuring Bad Boy rapper Mark Curry alleging Diddy spiked women's drinks at parties. The Diddy allegations also ventured into the comedy world, where comedian Cat Williams also previously made comments about Diddy's alleged wild parties. In January, Williams spoke out about Diddy during Shannon Sharp's Club Shay Shay podcast. Williams said, "I gotta protect my integrity because if P. Diddy be wanting to party, and you gotta tell him no." And just weeks prior to the raid, music producer Rodney Jones Jr., also known as Lil Rod, filed a $30 million lawsuit against Diddy, alleging sexual harassment and threatening him for more than a year. According to the suit, Jones claims he was subjected to possible drugging and rape, ritual humiliation, and being cheated out of more than $50,000 for work on Diddy's album. The suit also names actor Cuba Gooding Jr. Jones believes Diddy was grooming him in an attempt to pass him off to Gooding, leaving the two alone in a studio on Diddy's yacht, where Gooding is alleged to have groped and fondled Jones when the two were left alone. Diddy has denied Jones's allegations against him. It's not the first time Diddy Love, aka P. Diddy, aka Diddy, aka Puff Daddy, aka Puffy, has had a brush with the law. The rapper and mega producer has been embroiled in legal controversy going back more than 30 years. In 1991, Combs helped promote a celebrity basketball game in concert at City College of New York. The gym reportedly had a capacity of a little more than 2,700 people. However, nearly 5,000 people showed up, and security couldn't control the crowd. When organizers closed the door and stopped letting attendees inside, people broke through the gym doors, rushing into the lobby, causing a stampede. 9 people were crushed to death at the bottom of the staircase, and more than 20 others were injured. Then New York City Mayor David Dinkins' administration published a more than 60-page report citing Combs for hiring inadequate and inexperienced security. Combs settled a slew of lawsuits from family members of attendees who died and finalized the last lawsuit in 2000. And for hip-hop and rap fans, it's hard to imagine, but at one point, Diddy, known then as Puffy, and Suge Knight were once friends, but that relationship soured, even turning violent. The animosity between Puffy and Suge started when Suge's friend and security guard Jake Robles was shot and killed outside an Atlanta nightclub after an argument with someone from Puffy's Bad Boy entourage. Entourage members with Puff's and Suge Knight's camp were celebrating Jermaine Dupri's birthday when an argument broke out between Bad Boy and Death Row Records' entourage. An Atlanta PD officer told the LA Times police escorted Puffy and his guests outside to leave the club and thought the coast was clear, allowing Knight and his entourage to leave. The officer, who was working security for the party, said all of a sudden Puffy's men came around the corner with a gun. The officer/security guard told the Times by the time he got back to the front of the club, Suge's security guard had been shot multiple times. Robles died weeks later. Combs denied his involvement in the shooting, but Suge Knight reportedly held him responsible for it. 3 years later, in 1998, Combs and 2 other men attacked rapper Nas's manager, Steve Stout. According to Rolling Stone magazine, the attack happened after Stout sent MTV a version of Combs and Nas's Hate Me Now, which contained a scene showing Combs as Jesus Christ being crucified. Combs reportedly wanted the crucifixion scene deleted and was furious it played on air. Stout says Combs and 2 other men barged into his New York office and attacked him with a champagne bottle. He said he was left with a broken arm and jaw. Combs denied any bones were broken. He would later tell MTV, quote, "I basically went to his office, and what happened in his office I can't really speak about, but I can say this. The way I handled myself in his office was completely wrong, and I've apologized to Steve about that, and I felt like I just disappointed myself." Combs was charged with second-degree assault and criminal mischief and sentenced to just 1 day of anger management class. A year after the Stout attack in December of '99, Combs and his then protege Jamal Barrow, better known as Shine, and Diddy's then girlfriend Jennifer Lopez were partying at a club in New York when Diddy knocked a drink out of the hands of a man named Matthew Allen, also known as Scar. Scar got into an argument with Diddy, and at some point someone threw money at Diddy's face, and Scar threatened to kill Shine. Prosecutors say all 3 men drew guns, and Shine shot 3 times into a crowded club. 3 people were shot. Diddy and Jennifer Lopez left the scene but were later pulled over after running a red light. Police found a gun in the car, which led to the then couple getting arrested. Jennifer Lopez was detained for 14 hours and was ultimately released from custody. Diddy and J-Lo would later end their relationship. Diddy got indicted on charges stemming from the incident, including charges of criminal possession of an unregistered gun and attempted bribery for allegedly trying to get his bodyguard, Anthony Jones, to claim the weapon was his. Diddy's protege, Shine, who was also arrested with Diddy and Lopez, was convicted of 2 counts of assault, reckless endangerment, and gun possession. Diddy was acquitted while Shine was sentenced to 10 years in prison. So is it possible Shine took the fall to protect Diddy? Attorney Offie Patterson says the power dynamics between Diddy and those around him may have been an influence.
Well, I think you just said it. Their leader, their boss, a person who is in a position of power. What type of bargaining power did Shine have? Who I absolutely loved his album. Memorized every single song. I was really sad when that happened to him, but. What kind of power do they have? Like I mentioned earlier, it had long been rumored that Diddy does not financially take care of his artists. So, what type of place of power do they have? By example, if we look at J-Lo, she was pretty early on in her musical career. This was 99, 2000. What power did she have, at that point? So, and I think actually that was an opportunity for her to get out of the situation because from what I recall, after that whole nightclub situation, the relationship was severed professionally and personally. And I think that more than anything, this was just an opportunity for her to get out of something that maybe she couldn't have gotten out of so easily before.
Diddy's legal trouble and controversies didn't end there. In 2013, Diddy was allegedly involved in an altercation with rapper J. Cole during the 2013 MTV Music Video Awards after party. Multiple sources told Complex magazine Diddy was visibly intoxicated when he approached rapper Kendrick Lamar about his rap verse on Big Sean's Control, where Lamar said he was the king of New York. Combs reportedly tried to pour a drink on Lamar before J. Cole stepped in and they got into a fight. Both J. Cole and Diddy denied a fight even took place. But J. Cole later rapped on his 2021 song, Let Go My Hand, "My scrap was with Puff Daddy, who would have thought?" The next year, in 2014, Diddy and Drake allegedly got into a physical dispute when Combs allegedly punched Drake over the rights to the beat that would later become Drake's 0 to 100. According to the Miami New Times, the two got into an argument that turned into blows during a DJ Khaled event in which Diddy allegedly told Drake, "You will not disrespect me." But Combs would later deny punching Drake, telling The Breakfast Club, "I didn't do nothing to Drake. Drake is my friend." 6 months after that incident, Combs reportedly got into an altercation with a UCLA assistant football coach. Diddy was present for his son Justin Combs' football practice when the coach told Justin, "I don't care if your dad's here. This is UCLA. I'm going to treat you just like I treat everyone else." Well, Diddy seemingly didn't like the coach speaking to his son that way. Diddy and Justin reportedly went to the coach's office after practice. An argument broke out between Diddy and the coach. Diddy was arrested for allegedly swinging a kettlebell at the assistant coach and charged with assault with a deadly weapon. But Diddy's reps claimed he was acting in self-defense. Ultimately, prosecutors reduced Diddy's charges to a misdemeanor. In 2017, a former chef of Diddy's alleged she was regularly made to prepare and serve food to Diddy and his guests while they were engaged in sexual acts. At the time, a spokesperson for Diddy told Variety it was a frivolous lawsuit by a disgruntled ex-employee who was fired for cause. However, in 2019, the lawsuit was settled for an undisclosed amount. In 2019, Diddy's ex-girlfriend Gina Hunn told controversial blogger Tasha K Diddy physically abused her throughout their 5-year relationship. She claimed Diddy stomped her on the stomach to the point she couldn't breathe and also punched her in the back of the head. In the podcast, Hunn told Tasha K Diddy was mentally, emotionally, and physically abusive. She said Diddy would often compare her and his then-girlfriend at the time, singer Cassie, to one another, saying Cassie was the good one and Hunn was the bad one. Hunn said at the time everyone in Diddy's circle knew and allowed the abuse to occur. Those sentiments were echoed in singer Cassie Ventura's 2023 federal lawsuit against Diddy. The singer, who had dated Diddy on and off for a decade, accused the mogul of rape and abuse. In one incident, Diddy allegedly pushed her into a car, then proceeded to kick her in the face repeatedly. In another claim, an intoxicated Diddy allegedly gave Cassie a black eye after she tried to leave a hotel room. The hotel security camera footage captured the incident, but Diddy allegedly bought it off for $50,000. Cassie alleged Diddy had a pattern of abuse, including controlling every aspect of her life, from what she wore to where she lived. The suit alleged Diddy forced Cassie to have sex with male sex workers. And Diddy allegedly supplied Cassie with different drugs, including ecstasy and ketamine. The suit stated the drug abuse was so bad, Cassie suffered from memory loss. And when she went to the doctor's office, her MRI results were not sent to her, but obtained by Diddy instead. The suit was ultimately settled a day after it was filed for an undisclosed amount.
I wasn't surprised that he settled. I think he looked at the reaction from the public, and it was swift, and it was not pleasant for him. And I think he saw that it wasn't going to go away, so he settled. But again, I don't understand what advice he was getting. I'm sure it was some learned advice, but had it been me, I think I would have been like, sir, I don't think this looks good. Settle.
But did Cassie's lawsuit peel back the curtain to reveal the writing was always on the wall for Diddy? Attorney Offie Patterson believes so.
I don't think the allegations were as loud as they were, I believe, that day in November. I remember I was boarding a flight to London and I was reading Cassie Ventura's petition, and I was like, this is very loud, this is very explicit. I don't think the allegations had ever been that loud before. So I think people would always give him the benefit of the doubt because of his legacy in the community, because of what he's done. He had, of course, music, and then we know clothing, and then we know alcohol, and he had just a foothold in so many areas. So without some solid evidence, I think people always gave him the benefit of the doubt.
And Cassie's suit wasn't the end of it. Following the settlement, Diddy was hit with additional lawsuits from women claiming he sexually assaulted them. One, Jane Doe, claimed that Combs and singer Aaron Hall raped her and an unidentified friend in the early 90s. But a spokesperson for Diddy called the claims fabricated and a money grab. Then just last month, a former employee of Diddy's, Rodney Jones Jr., also known as Lil Rod, accused the rapper of sexual assault while working on Diddy's 2023 album. According to the suit, Jones claims he was subjected to possible drugging and rape, ritual humiliation, and being cheated out of more than $50,000 for work on Diddy's album. The suit also names actor Cuba Gooding Jr. Jones believed Diddy was grooming him in an attempt to pass him off to Gooding, leaving the two alone in a studio on Diddy's yacht, where Gooding is alleged to have groped and fondled Jones when the two were left alone. And that wasn't the only high-profile name attached to the suit. Jones claims Diddy used his access to celebrities, famous athletes, political figures, musicians, and international dignitaries like Prince Harry to draw guests to Diddy's parties, which were seemingly breeding grounds for alleged sex trafficking. Prince Harry is not a defendant in the suit, nor has he been accused of criminal acts. However, City Girls rapper Caresha Brownlee, aka Young Miami, has been named in Lil Rod's $30 million lawsuit. She's accused of transporting pink cocaine on a private jet from Miami to Virginia. And that's not the only claim against rapper Young Miami. Jones's lawsuit claims the City Girls rapper and 50 Cent's ex-girlfriend Daphne Joy were sex workers for Diddy and paid monthly stipends. At this time, Daphne Joy and Young Miami have not responded to the suit. However, Daphne Joy's ex, Curtis Jackson, aka 50 Cent, responded with this post to Instagram with the caption, "I didn't know you was a sex worker, you little sex worker. LOL. Yo, this stuff is a movie." So with nearly 30 years of different legal battles, why did it seemingly take so long for a reckoning when it came to Diddy? Patterson credits Cassie for opening the floodgates.
I think it's the different type of people who are involved in the music industry. You know, my friends and I were always talking, like, when is it going to happen for music? When is, music going to be Me Too'd? You know, I consider the television, film and television, the Wild Wild West. But, you know, that's the Wild Wild West. The music industry is just, I don't know what's crazier than that. But definitely music is. And I think it just always goes back to bargaining power and, the type of people who are in the music industry, what are their resources? So I think, and let's talk about like their unions, who do they have to go to collectively to organize and to support them, especially if, they're going to be the poster child for bringing somebody down. What are their collective resources? Who's supporting them? So I think that's why it's taken so long in music. And again, as far as Puffy goes, these alleged victims, thank God for Cassie, because she actually put her name behind it. And I think she empowered and enabled a lot of people to come out. And it's definitely starting with Puffy.
But could we see an arrest for the hip-hop mogul and mega hitmaker? Patterson says absolutely.
I've been looking at all of the just the YouTube videos and the interviews that his former employees and bodyguards and people closely associated with him have been giving. And one thing that's been repeated multiple times is the fact that Diddy has trophies. He keeps videos of everything. So I think after the raids, a lot is going to come out. It was said that there are secret cameras in every room. And if there is one person who is underage, he's going to be charged. But I suspect they're going to find a lot on those videos. And the arrest may not be, next week, and it may not be next month, but it's definitely